Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Anything Joe's, a collaborative journey through the world of G.I. Joe. My name is Greg Engel.
And I'm Joel Thompson.
And we'll be your host today. That's right, we're back for the second part of the modern figure analysis that we've been putting together, where we're looking at kind of the best figures that have come out from each subsection of the modern figures that have been created. Joel, I know you've gone back and listened to our first episode now that it's dated a little bit. Do you find that a lot of the things that you chose you feel differently about now?
I was flipping through the books by Kavanaugh, and I changed my list for this half of the episode. I was like looking back through and like over-analyzing my list and being like, well, I already chose this character once, so I shouldn't choose this character for this series. And it's crazy because, if I touched a figure between now and the last time we recorded, it might be higher in my list than it was before. So yes, long-winded way to say yes, I am very conflicted about everything I've said so far.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Now that my figures are available to me, I do have a very bad habit of picking a figure up and kind of taking him out of the lineup, and he starts to, or she starts to accelerate up my most enjoyable figures list because I've just started kind of goofing off with them. But I tried to not look at this list too extensively because I didn't want to get too caught in the weeds. If you missed that first episode, we'll link it here in the YouTube so you can go back and watch it. If you didn't listen to it, it's not a required listening. We were just working through them chronologically. You can jump in right here and we'll not have missed anything at all. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with 2011's G.I. Joe Renegades line, which is, roughly based on the cartoon, I would say. There are a lot of, figures that are identical to the cartoon, but they expanded the lineup and put some figures in there that didn't make it into the cartoon, or they are just like workups, I guess, of maybe what they could have been stuff that they were planning for season 2 and then it got shelved and never happened. I don't really know. But there are a couple of like extended universe guys, I think, in this line. Because this is a smaller wave, we only did one Joe, one Cobra, and one honorable mention. The Joe that I picked is Airtight. Which I think, Airtight, again, is in the Renegades cartoon. Doesn't really look in his, this is a pretty pure V1 version of Airtight. He doesn't quite look like that in the cartoon. And I'm glad because it turned out to be one of the only ones we got. I think it looks really good. The accessory loadout is great. I say this all the time. The only complaint I have about this figure is there's no unmasked version. The helmet is built in, which, it was common then, but I feel like we've evolved beyond that now.
He at least has a face. He's got the sock on. He's got like the hazmat head sock, but at least he has a face.
Until you can see that widow's peak that he's got from the cartoon, I'm like, it could be anybody, but that hairline is extremely defining. His weapon set is like really, I think, really accurate to what his V1 looked like also. Like his backpack is, I think, is pretty spot on.
He is my honorable mention, so I'll jump in now while we're talking about him instead of bringing him back up at the end. But yeah, this figure is one of the best of the entire modern line in terms of construction. His articulation, he borders on ninja. They used part of his build for like the nunchuck for the FSS. So he's got like...
Right, so versatile, right?
Yeah, like just such a good range of articulation. But that figure's a funny one because I said this when we talked about Lifeline last episode, but imagine telling like an old school collector that at one point in the modern range, Airtight and Law and Order were like two of the most sought after and like hard to get figures.
Even though this figure is kind of in a class all his own, I have always considered this figure to be part of like a holy trinity of figures that came out this time. Airtight, Lifeline, Sci-Fi, these all hit stores around the same time for me. So I had not even distinguished that it was part of a separate wave. But those three figures, in my opinion, are like flawless versions. Three great figures from, early on in the line that we didn't really have a good version of. And we were really lucky. When you look at the modern line is essentially DOA right now. We got a lot more figures than we probably should have. It takes Hasbro a long time to start pulling the trigger on characters like Airtight, I feel like. So I'm glad we got them, no matter how spaced out they ended up being. They're figures that I would really, really be missing now. Somebody that looks at his modern collection and is always like, what figures did they not make? So I'm glad we got around to these guys.
I'm also glad that he came out when he did, because I feel like if they would have made a Frank and Joe of him in the 25th, it would have kind of been a disappointment, and it would have led to some disappointing con figures, which we'll talk about in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Pursuit of Cobra was like the groundwork for great figures from other waves to come, and that includes a lot of these guys.
So my choice was Tunnel Rat. This figure is plucked directly off the screen, and he provides a head sculpt for Tunnel Rat that is, in my opinion, the only acceptable head sculpt in the modern era. And also, I mean, even without the cartoon, it is outfit aside, it is a great representation of the character Tunnel Rat.
The outfit is what typically steers me away from stuff like this, but you're right, the head mold is exceptional. I think the Renegades, the actual Renegades looking figures, are in their own little class because they are so different. Even that Scarlet from this wave, which I love, is just it's such a radical departure from what we're used to looking at that it is hard for me to be like, yes, this is my Tunnel Rat or this is my Scarlet. Duke would be my one exception. I think the Duke in this wave is kind of universally compatible, but that Scarlet, I keep coming back to, looks so different than the normal and than most Scarlets that we've gotten that I'm always put off a little bit. And this Tunnel Rat's the same way. I think the loadout for the Tunnel Rat's great. I think the outfit form's good. Just doesn't remind me of the Tunnel Rat that I know and love so much.
I mean, he is definitely not my... I built my own Tunnel Rat for my definitive Tunnel Rat for my collection. This is exactly what you said. This is his own thing. Like, I love having the squad of the Renegades crew, and it was amazing that, like, kind of echoing what you said a few minutes ago, we didn't get Renegades Roadblock until like a SDCC crossover set, like
yeah.
how many years later,
talk about right on the deadline to get him out of there before it was too late.
So who is your Cobra?
So I went straight to the top of the line and picked that Cobra Commander. It's actually funny because I literally am just talking about how Tunnel Rat doesn't look the way that I envisioned him, but this Cobra Commander is one of the most radical departures that we've ever seen for an envisioning a Cobra Commander. The thing I like about this Cobra Commander is that even though he does look really close to the cartoon, I mean very close, and he has that distinctive mask that Renegade's Cobra Commander wears, which only covers like diagonally half of his face, but I guess they thought to cover their bases because they included that the regular face mold also, or there's an alternate head that's just him covered up. Looking at this outfit, he's got like, I mean, Joel, you're a little bit more of a military enthusiast than I am, but that trench coat has like a certain era of a feel to it. I don't know if you can place that, but to me, it makes me think like Nazi Germany or some kind of like...
Yes, it has like World War II and forward era, like dictator vibes, I guess. And also has like a slight anime villain vibe as well.
Sure. Yeah, wouldn't be crazy to say that it's a mock-up of like a Sigma 6 Cobra Commander. You know what I mean? Like it does have...
Yeah. I mean, that Cobra Commander figure is awesome. Just, again, this toy line is... There's really no stinkers in the Renegades. I mean, it was a short-lived wave, which is obviously why we're only doing one of each, but as a whole, like it is kind of a home run of a subset. Even the weird Amazon exclusives that had slightly different leg articulation. The two ninjas had the three ninjas. There was a Snake Eyes Storm Shadow and a red ninja they called a Ninja Viper that had a unique leg style that never existed in the brand outside of those three figures. And if memory serves me right, there was some pre-production figures that images got leaked for Renegades where they were like seriously a departure from Modern Joes. Like they were pushing this in an entirely different direction, and the community outcry was so extreme that they scrapped it and went back to giving us something that's a little bit more compatible with the rest of the line.
Wow, that sounds really familiar. Somebody try, let's move them forward. Oh, you guys don't like that? All right, here's a verbatim what you guys had as a child.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation for a different time. But I think I tried Googling them a couple years ago, and I can't remember if I ever came across them or not. But my Cobra, I changed it today, actually. But I landed on the Storm Shadow because now he has been re-released 2 more times since then, but finding this Renegade Storm Shadow at the time of release was damn near impossible.
Sorry, is this the Amazon exclusive one or just the regular release?
Oh, sorry. This is the regular carded Renegade Storm Shadow single release.
Got it.
The one that then got carried forward in 50th and then into the retro card backs.
This figure was also extremely hard for me to track down as well.
It was extremely hard for everybody, and he was pretty much immediately like 5 times retail, which back then was under $10, but still, like, he shot up to like a club exclusive figure price point. And I actually even to this day, if I see a carded, I mean, he's dropped now because he's been so available, but if I see a carded Renegade Storm Shadow, it's like for a fair price, it's really hard for me to walk away, even though I have too many of this figure mold to that I'd like to talk about.
So we have an upcoming conversation we're going to have a third part of this where we talk about the best version of the most produced figures in the modern G.I. Joe line. And this might leak into that a little bit, but what is it about this Storm Shadow that you think puts it above a lot of the other Storm Shadows in the line?
So, number one, the gear. I will say, and this is not a spoiler because it's not in my Retaliation list, but the Retaliation Ultimate is probably the only Storm Shadow I think that gives this a run for its money. There's a lot of cool ones throughout. I'm not like totally poo-pooing on every other ones, but if I were to pick 2 of the best, I would have a hard time telling you between this one and the Retaliation Ultimate one. I'd have a hard time putting one over the other because they're both fantastic. Mm-hmm. This one, for me, a big thing for me is always articulation. And this body build, almost the perfect modern era ninja. If they gave him the rocker ankles, which they gave on the more deluxe ninjas after this figure, then that would basically be the only thing it needed to be like, the rocker ankles are funny for me because I can go both ways. They're great, especially for ninjas, but this one looks great and functions just fine. But I think for me, having the 2 sets of secondaries, so you can give him the cartoon look with the cartoon head, and then you can give him, a more classic look, but with, full sleeves instead of bare arms. But it's just such a good figure. And it's the gear loadout. I mean, he comes with like so much stuff.
Yeah, crazy amount of stuff.
Like so much ninja fodder. And I mean, part of I troop build these guys. I did in the 50th because you could, for the Renegade setup, if I wanted to, I could use one of the Storm Shadows with the cartoon head and the red gear and have, X amount of the other version standing behind them just as like white ninjas. But this is what I wanted to say, and I'll share this sentiment with a figure at the end of our conversation, but I remember when I finally found this figure, and getting him and opening him. I got him in before I knew the 50th was coming, but I finally had found a carded Renegades one for a fair price, and getting him and opening him was like I was not disappointed. It was a figure that had a ton of hype, that lived up to the hype when I opened it and was like playing around with it and loading him up, and it's a great feeling because I think you and I have both shared spending too much money on a modern era figure, and then you get it and you get it in hand and you're just like almost sick to your stomach because some of these have gotten so grossly expensive, and then when it either breaks or doesn't deliver, like it's hard.
It's defeating, absolutely. I run a pretty fine line between if I've paid a certain amount, I don't want to play with it because I'm afraid something will happen to it. But then simultaneously, I've bought figures. Let's say $40 to $50 is a low entry point for an FSS figure. It may been at least. Now I know it's all over the place, but I bought a Vipra, a second Vipra, because I liked her so much. I wanted one to open and play with, and it was probably about $40 or $50. So no small purchase. And it broke almost immediately just trying to pose it. Like the quality control on them was pretty rough. All right, so let's wrap up the Renegades line with our honorable mention. My honorable mention is Law and Order, which prior to the FSS was a figure that I think everybody had pretty high on their demand. The reason this is an honorable mention and not a flat out like not something that is flat out chose is really just because the color scheme is not in line with the original Law and Order. But it's got a crazy good loadout. I don't know if they had used this dog mold before, but for something that is essentially non-movable, I thought they did a pretty solid job. I mean, like, I have a million timbers in my collection of all different colors, but this dog I always know belongs to this law.
Yeah, that law was designed for this line. And it's actually nice because its head is articulated.
Right, he can like kind of give the little like the little dog.
Yeah, and then in the retaliation line, they gave us there's like one timber that stands out, and it's there's a timber that comes with the ultimate version 2 Snake Eyes that has an articulated head as well. But that figure was really hard to not put on as my one choice. But there's just that Tunnel Rat is just such a fun figure that it just barely beat out Law and Order. He was almost my choice. But rolling into Retaliation, I have another figure that changed today.
Okay.
But we share one, so I'll throw out my other one. Today I updated my list to include Sergeant Airborne.
Okay.
He came in a 3-pack with Mouse and a Snake Eyes, I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And
it's either a Snake Eyes or a Roadblock because they came in every 3-pack.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah, wow. So many. Yeah, it was Snake Eyes and Mouse, but this base body is one of my favorites. It's the same build as the Data Viper. It's the same build as Lift Ticket. A few figures moving forward use this. It's just another one of these like master builds. And then you load him up with his secondaries, and for me, it's just what's not to love about this. It's a little bit sci-fi, almost. I'm assuming almost nailed to reality perfectly. Besides maybe the helmet, I don't know. I'm not a parajumper, but he has like a very interesting like ski mask style head that is almost looks a little bit more like bank robber evil, but
Yes.
There's something about the way the tan and the green with the little blue highlights that really just pops. And it's one of those figures that once I got him in hand and opened him, I could not put him down. And he comes with this like awesome little submachine gun and a cool little shotgun. But I just love this figure. So
the only thing I don't like about this Airborne is, well, there's two things. One, there's no unmaxed head, and I'm going to pick that apart every time. And two, it doesn't look like Airborne to me. Like the color, the blue is perfect. Like that's a solid lock to a V1 Airborne. But the tan, I wish was a much lighter tan to actually look like his V1 colors. In terms of if I was just looking at this figure and didn't have a name attached to it, it's an amazing figure. Yes, the loadout is insane.
I threw an unmasked head on one of mine, and then I have a handful that are just generic Halo jumpers.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I had an extra of the regular Sergeant Airbornes, I could throw that head on there. There's no other skin tone to map to it, so it would be pretty good. I'd actually might look at that and see how it looks, just for a modernization point of view.
That's not a bad idea.
So, who's your other Joe?
So my other Joe is Quinn, which we both share.
That's correct. We both picked Quinn, and I will go ahead and say that I picked one of the other figures in that 3-pack, and I picked Mouse. Now, you might say that might be an unusual pick. I don't know if Mouse is an unpopular choice. I mean, like, it was certainly a surprise when it came out in the 3-pack because I thought, oh my gosh, the deepest of deep cuts. But the thing I like about Mouse is that, one, his head mold he looks very young, and that is not something that you see a whole lot in the G.I. Joe universe anymore. And two, even though he's reusing a lot of parts, it's like a real simple, I don't want to say green shirt, but he has just a straight infantry vibe to him that I really like.
He's a fantastic figure. I mean, they used a set of lower legs in the Retaliation line that I was not crazy about on almost all of the figures. But And it was just an aesthetic thing. I just didn't like the way it was like boots with covers on them, or spats, I should say. I think is the proper term. But ignoring the spats, that figure, the head mold was new and unique to that character. I didn't know really anything about Mouse. I still don't know a lot, but the figure's, it is a fantastic figure. So I have nothing. I would have no pushback on you for picking him.
So let's talk about this Quinn then. So this is the second modern Quinn they made, right? This is the better of the two.
Well, it's the only modern construction Quinn.
Oh, what am I thinking of?
You're thinking of they did an O-ring 3-pack Quinn.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, I thought there was another less impressive modern Quinn. Well, that makes this one all the more important then, because not only is this the first, it's only the second version of Quinn, one of the most easily requested figures that we didn't get as children. And the V1 Quinn, which came with the comic book 3-pack, isn't bad for its time, but certainly doesn't hold stock now, as opposed to this figure, which I think looks really, just truly exceptional. Probably one of the best modern figures out there, and was certainly way up there on my list of figures that I wanted. Quinn, Dr. Venom, Scarface, any of those characters from the early days that they never made, I have been pining for pretty much forever. And I really think they nailed it. I think this Quinn is just about exactly what I would have wanted out of it. Yeah,
I would say that I wish that we would have gotten a true Scarface in the more modern era, like POC forward, and I wish that we got like a better Dr. Venom. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about Quinn. The tail end of Retaliation should let everybody know that at that point in time, there were some genuine G.I. Joe fans working on the brand, because Quinn is a severe deep cut. Way back when I was listening to What's on Joe Mind, when these figures were coming out, and I believe that one of them had talked to somebody on the team, and I believe the quote was like, "Hell or high water, I will be getting a modern Quinn out for everybody, because he's a character that I want to." I don't remember who exactly that was. Maybe it was John Warden. I wouldn't say that in court. I don't remember, but this figure is just everything. It is everything that would highlight the modern era of G.I. Joe. His gear he's got enough gear to do 2 or 3 configurations. The articulation is outstanding. Who would have thought I'd be this excited for a guy in shorts and combat boots?
It would have been very easy to push the design of Quinn to something different than that. So I appreciate that they held their ground and made him look exactly, or as close to comic book authentic as they could. Go ahead and let's go ahead and lead on into the Cobra stuff. Go ahead and tell me about your Cobra picks.
My first choice is a Retaliation 3-pack, the Invasion 3-pack Firefly. This Firefly is, in my opinion, the epitome of a modern update. He's got gray with a little bit of offset camo. He's got removable bombs. He comes with like a grenade launcher, a shotgun, 2 knives, a pistol, and he screams iconic Firefly, but also looks like he doesn't look dated to the 80s. He looks like a modern guy.
Yeah, I would say this and the very last wave Firefly that came out in the 50th anniversary are, 2 of the strongest Firefly figures that they've ever made. I think this figure looks really good. Came out in a time where it was hard for them to stay true to their roots, I think, because this was so close to the movie. They could have easily just been like, we'll just make him look exactly like Ray Stevenson, So I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, there was some later line Retaliation figures, and a lot of the 3-packs, they really threw out stuff for us. Like, they really put in some heavy, like, fan nod figures, and I love that about the movie line, that you didn't have to buy, if you didn't want to, you didn't have to buy the movie figures, and there were still amazing G.I. Joe figures on the pegs at the same time, in the same packaging, that represented what we loved about the brand prior to the movie.
Who's your other Cobra? We'll go ahead and knock those both out.
Okay, my other Cobra is the Data Viper. This is...
I love this figure.
Yeah, it's I love a new character. I love a new design. The weird masked head under the crazy triangular helmet looks amazing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he's an extremely versatile figure with or without his insane gear. And then you throw in the crazy like virtual reality control stick drone pilot,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call him. But I've used this base body for Cobra pilots. It's because it's that airborne body that they used with Lift Ticket. It's just so good. I love that. It's just reminding us that G.I. Joe was rooted in sci-fi, and this is definitely like a future warrior on the bad side.
Yeah, I like it when they explore the technology aspect of Cobra a little bit more. Like, you've always got your mainframes or your firewalls or whatever hacking computers, but you don't really see a lot of like Cobra specialists that are like technology driven. Like, there's no like Cobra hacker. So having guys like this, I think, are really cool. The gear alone is just like, it's like when you find that first Jungle Viper with the huge leaf setup, and you're like, holy smokes, these guys went all in and then some. Okay, so on my Cobra side of things, my first pick was the Ultimate Cobra Commander, which I didn't own until I got from you this year. It's funny because I was looking at Cobra Commanders to use for some like Dow picks or something, and everyone I picked up, I was like, it's not quite good. It's just a little too dated. And when I looked online and saw this one, I was like, oh, I want to see this one in person. And so you were fortunate enough to have an extra one to hook me up with at a great deal. And so I got home, I opened it up, and was just blown away with how much further this figure is from other Cobra Commanders prior to it. And just in terms of like talking about Cobra Commander and his regular base gear, hooded or battle armor, either one, that this is it. Like, it doesn't get any better. I like other modern like advancements of Cobra Commander's outfits, like newer takes on it, but for originals, there's nothing better than this. Probably one of the last time, I mean, a handful of times, but one of the last times we got the hooded Cobra Commander as well, since that's pretty much off the market altogether. So it's nice. And also one of the only times I can think of where he can be either hooded or masked, like not something that they would typically go for all the time. So there's a reason these are called Ultimates, because it truly is the best of the best, in my opinion.
We're burnt out on core characters, but when they give us a core character on that level with that much detail and that much option, it's hard to be upset.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that figure is one of the more expensive from this era. I mean, I even like the goofy like helicopter backpack he comes with. It's got a weird play feature, but it still works somehow in my eyes. Who else do you have?
My other pick is the Data Viper. So my honorable mention is somebody that would fall in line with him just fine. It's the Cyber Ninja. The Cyber Ninja was like a late addition into my collection. This wave in general was kind of hard to find on the peg unless you were just in the right place at the right time. So by the time I picked up the Cyber Ninja, like anything that was fed into his like mythology, because he's not based on any existing, like he's not in the movie or anything like that I'm aware of. So you only have a little bit of information to go on. But the gear that the Cyber Viper is like set up with, I think makes a great just about anybody. Like you can do pretty much anything you want to with him.
I believe he was actually supposed to be somewhat of a POC-ish, like kind of like a reimagining of the Night Creepers.
I can see that. I mean, you've got the technology vibe, and then he's wearing swords on his back here, so that kind of backs up. If you were designing a Cyber Viper from the ground up, I don't think a melee weapon would be the first thing that comes to mind, especially since he's holding some kind of like railgun or something. Like they're clearly trying to push the technology aspect of it as far as they can. The like blue like piping that lines his outfit, I think, is also stylized very well. It's minimalistic, but it has just enough deviation to give you like a little bit of a Tron vibe, I think, is what they're kind of going for. This is a figure that there's almost no information on, and I was like, oh, he looks so good. I think I can do something really cool with him. Data Viper kind of the same way. Don't you really use the Data Viper, but it's just too cool to pass up. Like, just open up your imagination and do something with him.
Yeah, the Cyber Ninjas are the only thing. My only complaint with them are just the lower arms are very dated. They're Riser Cobra lower arms, but I've since started to be a little less like fussy about that stuff because every other element of this figure works, and he can hold all of his gear just fine. So my honorable mention is the Dark Ninja, which is the Renegade's Storm Shadow body, but in gray and black with a red dragon, with a red dragon on his chest. He comes with a different winged glider pack. The Retaliation, they really leaned into ninja. I mean, to the point where, like, Roadblock was also a ninja. But on the
driving his All Striker with the Arashikage logo on the front of it. Sure, they were branded. They were branded big time then.
While that was a little bit frustrating on the G.I. Joe side, on the Cobra side, it was a treat because we got red ninjas, dark ninjas. We got a different version of the red ninja in a 3-pack. We got a lot of ninjas, and I'm just a big ninja guy, so I was happy, and this figure rules.
Yeah, this is an interesting figure. Another figure that has got like no backstory, just like a DIY, but the red dragon on the front really sells it. And also I'll say this, that I figure that's kind of in nothing but shades of black. Is always very appealing to me. It's got just like, I don't know, nitty gritty Night Force vibes. All right, so what's next? Oh, good. Next is we've called it the Dollar General line. I don't know if it is officially called the basic line on Arashikage cards, as they're referring to it here on his tank.
I mean, they were sold exclusively at Dollar Generals, so
I did not get any of these figures when they came out. I don't know if it was just I did not know they were there, if I was like, these are not good enough for me, or what it was. But I have all the figures I have from this wave I've picked up later on. And it's a shame because there are some real gems in here. The Joe that I picked out of this line was always going to be this Snake Eyes, because it's a take on a Snake Eyes that we did not get a modern version of. It's still a pretty well liked, if you're of a certain age, this is your Snake Eyes. And for $1, budget line, I think they did a really, really good job with it. This is all reused parts, limited articulation. They did not go above and beyond in any sense. So this is one of the only figures that is actually like kind of unique to the line, in that he was somebody that we needed to fill out on our roster.
The Dollar General line was, my choice was the blue-clad Shipwreck. He kind of reminds me of the images I've seen from the Devil's Due era, where he's got the knit sweater, the gray trousers. I love that he has a beanie and like a diving mask. That's fun. But these were, I had a lot of fun hunting these down, and they were like $5, and they came with a figure stand, and some had more accessories than others. Like Shipwreck came with a breathing mask, a backpack. They came with a Renegade's like plasma pistol, but I'm assuming they were kind of calling it like a flare gun or something, because there's no actual, like, they didn't give us a breakdown of what he got, but
right.
I've used this base body for a lot of lazy customs in both the green and the blue. But I'll roll into my Cobra, and the Cobra I chose was the Cobra Trooper in black. And this is one of my favorite troop builders, period. It's so simple, but like the black with the gray and silver highlights looks so good. And I have also had a ton of fun doing just head swaps and vest swaps to make a like little squad of Cobra invasers. Because it has the silver Cobra logo already on the chest, so I don't have
absolutely.
I don't have to try to do anything. It's like it's kind of a dream come true on that sense. And it also kind of gives us like a diet like like night guardsman, like Cobra Night Watch.
Yeah, I was just saying, there's something very appealing about it. Shades of all black on a figure. You can do a lot with that, because you want to add another color, it'll match. If you, in this particular figure who has showing no other skin tone other than his face, you could. The options are unlimited, especially for such a cheap figure. The Cobra that I picked from this line is the 2013 Storm Shadow, which is in the Genzu color scheme, and I picked it for the exact same reason that I picked that Snake Eyes. It's a figure that we didn't get in the modern line. It was something that I wanted. They actually made 2 Storm Shadows in this set. They did the Ninja Force one and they did this one. And for what it is, I mean, again, it's the paint. They did the paint scheme right. It's simple, but it's no worse than the time that they took that Retro Scarlet and painted her shoulder pad on over top of her torso. So nothing that they haven't done before, and I think it holds up really, really well. Not a great accessory set, but as far as a figure for the price point, I think is unbelievable.
I guess we should say, for anybody who's not familiar, they did Duke, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Shipwreck, Cobra Trooper, and Cobra Commander, and they all came in 2 colors. But the Snake Eyes is the Renegades build. But it has an added hood and different accessories, but it was a fun way. I think, again, that the team working on the brand at that point was really good at throwing in little Easter eggs because, they just labeled him Storm Shadow, but, he was actually a character missing from the Ninja Force.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the 50th anniversary.
All right, now we're getting into the real deal.
Now we're getting into where I went completely haywire with buying.
All right, go ahead and kick us off and tell me what you got.
All right, so this one was a hard one for me because, like I said, this is kind of really where I started going like full in as the figures were hitting. Like I came in retaliation, but I wasn't like I hadn't quite grasped army building yet, and I really hadn't dived super far into figuring out the characters, we'll say, like just going off my childhood memory. So
sure.
50th is a fun one for me. So my first pick, I went with Spirit. This Spirit came with a V2 Storm Shadow, and this Spirit for me was very important because it left kind of the old aesthetic, Village People-esque, like very 80s, like we're just going to throw everything we know about Native Americans onto one figure.
Right. Truly stereotypical. Like when you look at the rearview mirror, you're like, maybe not so many things all at once.
Yeah. And, I'm not gonna hold, like, times were different in the 80s, times were different 15 years ago, but this figure, in my opinion, gives us a new deco. He's in like a tan desert gear. He's got a slightly darker skin tone. In my opinion, it holds true to the character. His accessories scream back to the origins of, the Spirit that we know. But again, he's wearing combat boots. He's not wearing moccasins. It's just a great figure. So who's your first pick?
Before we move on to that, this figure takes what was good about the POC Spirit and kind of walks it away from the Predator vibe that it's screaming. And so I like that. As in terms of a character that is evolving correctly, I think this is a perfect example of a character that's stepping forward and is still extremely cool. My first figure from this set is that Shipwreck. So for the exact same reason that you like that the Dollar Tree, is it Dollar Tree? Dollar
General.
Dollar General, that's right. So many dollar places. None of them cost $1. The same reason that you like that is basically the same reason I picked this Shipwreck. Takes everything that was good about the beanie cap isn't like kind of an established thing from the Devil's Due run, where if he's not in his old Sailor Boy gear, he was kind of wearing a little beanie, and I like this. This is it leans a little bit almost into recreational Shipwreck's outfit because he's just wearing like a t-shirt, but he is something that is really needed. We were just talking about, or Jaron and I were just talking about how Torpedo is a figure that is almost always in a wetsuit, and for 90% of his figures, and you get burnt out on the concept of having a character that is tethered to the environment that he specializes in. And so that's one of the things I really like about this Shipwreck, is that I can put him on a flag, and he can actually be doing repairs, helping Sky Strikers take off, whatever.
Yeah, I also chose this for my second one, and as much as I did try to avoid picking the same ones, there were some of these figures that were too good to ignore. This Shipwreck is that a perfect example. I guess I want to double back really quick and just say that I love the beanie cap look. That's modern Navy. It looks great. I just want to clarify, that I do love the beanie cap. It's just a funny concept to have like a winter hat on and with scuba gear. Anyways, we're talking about this shipwreck. The 50th shipwreck is he still looks Navy. You know, he does have a Navy t-shirt on. He's got olive drab pants. He's got a great secondary vest. He comes with a good gear loadout, but he also kind of fills that like need of like, if you cover up or remove the printed Navy logo on his chest, it works for a guy at the pit. You know, it's just a generic, almost just a generic like Army guy off duty. On duty, but like not in combat. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was no way I could leave him off. I've used that figure to kit bash out and make some cool variations in my Steel Brigade units.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that figure, and I'm really glad with what they were working with, which I know was very limited for this 2014-2015 line. They did very good work for what they had to work with. My other Joe that I chose is a figure that I actually am somewhat conflicted on, but it's the Outback version 10. This is the version that was in the Special Forces 3-pack with Shooter and Falcon. He's like dressed in all black. You know, we've talked about this a lot, at least offline, but Outback is a modern figure that has been well underserved across the line. Everything up to this figure, I feel like, is a pretty severe disappointment in terms of articulation, in terms of design, and just does not hit on the level that it should. And this is not my perfect Outback by large, but they course corrected a lot of stuff. Like, and until this figure came out, it wasn't until I really saw this Outback head in a new light, because the body of the other ones are so underservicing that it makes him look like he's on drugs or something. He just looks so scrawny, and he can't even, well, I'd say that, but his arms can't even probably bend in a way that would allow him to do drugs. But this Outback course, I mean, is like really solid. Again, it's in all black, so I'm on board with that. I know they were selling a bit of a Night Force 5 here, even though they have a different name. First thing I did with this figure was take that vest off. I was so thrilled to find the survival on the shirt underneath the vest. That's like a detail that you just don't see anymore. Like, they certainly did not have to do that. And so when I lost that vest, this figure became a real winner for me.
He's a hard one, because the thing that really kills this figure for me is they painted his biceps the same. Well, they cast his biceps in the same color as the shirt, and they didn't paint his upper arms.
I see that now.
So you can see a sculpted t-shirt line, but then it just goes down past into his elbow, is all the same color. And it was on every single figure. It was not a paint mistake. It was a design mistake, or it was a paint mistake that didn't get caught ever.
Well, you say that, but on this one, they have clearly put the tattoo, or I guess the design on his sleeve. So are you saying that the wolf is supposed to be a tattoo and that's supposed to be skin? I think they designed it this way, and they were like, nobody's going to notice this.
I think I'm going to guess that tampo was supposed to be a little higher on his arm. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to guess that it was I think it was a paint mistake that got missed. And by the time it was probably caught, they were probably already on their way over to hit Toys R Us. So it was probably just like, still looks like a t-shirt. Screw it.
Yeah. I can't think of it. I mean, I don't know. I've seen some pretty crazy design decisions from this line. And it's, again, not the first time that they've just been like, just paint over it. Nobody will notice.
My brain can't accept that they were like, no one's going to notice that there's a sculpted t-shirt here that we painted over.
Do you even care about your job? Look at the sleeve.
We needed, this Outback is a little bit beefier than, the 25th Outback is, like you said, looks, he looks sick. Mm-hmm. He's very small. There was a lot of underscaled figures in that era, but this, for me, I think he came with like the Battle Kata, like weird vest. I hate that vest. I hate it so much. Because he didn't come with any of the Battle Kata gear, which I'm happy about, but he's not a terrible figure. Outback is a hard one for me, because I don't think we have a good modern Outback, period.
Lead us on into the Cobra side of things.
I went with the Cobra Eel. The 25th Cobra Eel is good. Again, it's the wetsuit thing, so he can look scrawny and small because he's in, whatever. But the 50th Cobra Eel came in a set with Flint, the Night Landing Raft, and the version 2 Vamp. And in this kind of like a weird gray colorway, but this eel is incredible. His gear is insane. It's just truly, it is a modern update that we needed. He's got, and the big thing, articulated flippers.
Yeah, yes.
And I'll leave it with this. That set was incredible. It came with a foot locker of gear for the Cobra side, and luckily, like I said, the 50th is when I started to kind of troop build, so I bought a few extra sets of this because it was the only way to get the eel, but then also getting the Night Landing Raft and all those accessories, it was such a good value. I mean, I think it was like $25 or $30 or something like that, which, that's 2 modern figures, a Vamp, and a Raft, and a metric ton of accessories.
Do you have any thoughts about the convention exclusive variation on this?
I love it. Absolutely love it. It's a bit frustrating that they gave us like the classic colorway Flint was only in the SDCC exclusive set. I mean, along with also with the Vamp, being tan with the white wheels as well. But again, there's definitely a bit of confusion at this point in the line with some directions. I mean, there's some stuff that didn't make either of our lists that is a conversation that'll get me a little bit more heated than I would want to put out. But I do love the alternate colorway from the convention.
Yeah, I like this a lot too. I think that the alternate convention makes a great squad leader, and then you put them with the regular ones, and you've got a solid team. Helps the aesthetic, because they come basically from the same exact set, really makes them work together very well.
Okay, so who is your first Cobra?
So my first Cobra is a no-brainer. It's Zombie Viper. So when the Zombie Viper hit, I don't remember what the initial reaction from the public was, but I want to say that it was pretty positive. When people hit the really mash that science fiction fantasy button, people sometimes spur back from it and they're like, it's too unrealistic. But I feel like the Zombie Viper was designed so well that most people were on board with it right away. Was a concept that was a little, I don't want to say on the outside, but we haven't really seen a lot of like quote unquote the undead in G.I. Joe, even though we've seen tons of supernatural stuff. So it was cool to see somebody pushing forward kind of like the cartoon values of it. And then they did it in such a good way that it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. Like the alternate limbs that are extending, the like little bubble that you put on his head so you can like put them in your Dio lab as like rotten in test tubes. This was a figure that as soon as it came out, I was like, I want as many of them as I can. And it wasn't until that 2-pack came out where you could just get 2 of them together that I was like, finally, I can actually stock up a few of these.
It was a good move where they finally, I think they should have done that with a couple other ones, but again, conversation for a different time. I like the Zombie Viper was a huge hit. I mean, I know there's always people who hate something, and this is definitely, the Zombie Viper is definitely like exactly what you said, extreme sci-fi. But I think overall, I mean, that figure was hard to find. He held his. I mean, he went for a decent upcharge on the secondary market.
Yeah, for something that was a troop builder, absolutely.
And it made perfect sense for them to do a 2-pack in the 50th. I mean, I got somewhere between 25 and 30 of those 2-packs.
Oh my God, Joel.
That's
too many.
I am who I am. It was so hard to find the stuff that when I saw cases or when I saw sets of anything, it was hard for me to leave them.
Sure.
And to be honest, I got incredibly lucky with some of these. I got a lot of my Viper 2-packs on clearance. I do miss Toys R Us.
I do too.
All right, my second one is Destro. That, to me, is, I believe he might have been a concept case, Destro, maybe. I don't know.
What's that mean? What's a concept case?
So there was a Joe-Con where that really good G.I. Joe team had a bunch of figures that were prior to Retaliation. They were like figures that were supposed to be part of, I believe, the 50th celebration, or excuse me, the Pursuit of Cobra 30th. It was in that time frame. Mm-hmm. Like the Gung Ho from the 50th, the Destro, the Eel, the Hit and Run that the club ended up using was from the concept case. If you go to His Tank and you search concept case, there's like some really amazing stuff that we never got. There's some amazing stuff from Renegade, some vehicles. There's like there were drawings for a flag playset that never came out.
Oh Lord.
There's but so yes, this Destro was designed to be the definitive upgrade of Destro, and it's exactly what it is. And you know, they reused it in the retro line. They changed his paint a little bit to make him a little bit more cartoon accurate. But to me, this Destro, I bought a couple extras. He came in a 3-pack, but I bought a couple extras because that head, I use that for all of my variant Destros. So for my Moneybags Destro, I use this head. I have, you know, my own armored up, battle ready Destro with this head because this head is clearly a mask, and it has exaggerated features because of being a mask. And he comes with, I mean, his articulation is credible. He's a big figure. He stands taller than some of the other figures. And he comes with an incredible gun that breaks down into pieces and goes in a briefcase.
There's a level of talent and awareness that's required when you're designing a distro, especially the head mold, because there are an infinite amount of distro heads that do not look like he's wearing a mask, period. And the sculptor on this head mold has done such a flawless job designing it to where it looks like he's actually wearing a helmet, and I got to give props for that because that is not something you see very often with distros. It's easily my favorite part of this design.
If you're a Destro fan and you have an issue with this Destro, I would love to talk about it and just not even to argue. I just want to hear how you could not like this figure if you're a modern guy. But
yeah, he's a beast too, which I think is really cool. This is an unusual choice for me, but my second pick for Cobra is something that I don't pick very often, and it's a troop builder, like an actual legit troop builder. It's Shadow Guard. The Shadow Guard is such a cool idea, and I mean, it would have been easy to just drop out another Crimson Guard and call it a day, but they went a little bit above and beyond, and they were like, let's see if we can deck this guys out a little bit better. I like the idea of a subset of the Crimson Guard that's like even better at their job or even more important. The Shadow Guard, I don't know if there's an older version than the Toys R Us 6-pack, but the Shadow Guard that came out then with the removable helmets, I had always treated as kind of like an elite bodyguard unit for insert whoever, Tomax and Zaymot, Cobra Commander, whoever. That because they just kind of like stood out. They looked more badass. I really liked this figure. I liked it enough that I was troop building it, despite the fact that it meant I was going to be buying several other gung hos that I had absolutely no purpose for.
You're gonna laugh and say the same thing you said, but I think I wound up with like 25 or 30 of them.
Oh my gosh, that's 2-packs. That's 30 gung hos. What are you doing with 30 gung hos?
Well, a lot of them are still carded. I've hooked up a bunch of people with gung hos. I sold a few gung hos. I sent gung hos to strangers that I met on Instagram. That
do you just cut the card in half and send them their half?
That's not a bad idea, but I did remove it from the bubble, cut the file card. But the Shadow Guard is, it used that Retaliation Ultimate Crimson Guard, which is just an amazing battle-ready Crimson Guard. But yeah, the Shadow Guard is just a fantastic troop builder, and it pairs well with the Cobra Commander that came with Shipwreck, where he's in black, and I paired a bunch of my Shadow Guards with the black-clad Cobra Commander, but I also have the same viewpoint you do, where I use the Shadow Guards kind of as the elite of the elite.
Right. It just makes sense, right? They're just like, there's something about it that screams hey, we're better than just the regular Crimson Guards. Joel, I know we're running long, and I absolutely hate to deviate into other talk, but I've got to know, when you troop build 20, let's say 20 plus figures, how many of those do you actually open?
So it depends. I still don't have my collection room built. When I lived in my old house, you know, it was a thing where I was like, well, as soon as I have like my space and I have a place where I can get everything out, I will probably open all of them to some extent. You know, part of what I did when I was buying all the G.I. Joe stuff I could find when it was hitting clearance, and even before it was hitting clearance, I would buy as much as I could afford to buy every time I found it. You know, it's been a kind of a nice treat for me to be able to help a few people out. You know, if they missed out on something, like Gung Ho was actually hard to get. Ironically, I know I just said I wound up with like 25 or 30, but like he was actually kind of hard to get. A lot of people had a hard time finding him because everybody was scooping him up. Mm-hmm. And I was able to help a few people out with those, at retail. I just said, I'm keeping the Shadow Guard, but I'll sell you Gung Ho.
It's funny to hear you talk like that because I'm the exact opposite. My wife could walk in right now and go, our daughter's dying, and the only thing that will save her is a modern unopened G.I. Joe Sky Striker. And then in my closet, there's like 10 sealed, and I'm like, well, that's a bummer. We had a good run. I just don't want to part off with anything. If I end up with a duplicate of something, and I have any use for it at all, I'm just like, nope, got to keep it. Might need it someday. You never know.
Well, I am like that for the most part, but when I there's also a part of me that, when I hooked you up with the Cobra Commander, there was a bunch of other stuff in that box too that were not necessarily the easiest things to come by.
Sure.
And there is a part of it where I have had a few really lucky run-ins in my life with collecting, whether it's people or just like finding stuff for a good deal.
You've been collecting people?
Well, no, I'm saying like when you meet somebody that, is selling you stuff for retail, even when they know it's worth far more than retail, I try to pay that forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
In hopes that like the universe will pay me back.
Yeah, Joe Karma. All right, so let's talk about, as we wrap up, we'll do our honorable mentions. My honorable mention for this line was Stiletto. Now, I've talked about Stiletto before, and I talk about Stiletto socially sometimes because the story that she was based on, she was the winner of the contest. If you're not familiar with this, at this time, they were running a contest on, I think it was on Kindle. They had opened it up, and they were like, anybody could write a G.I. Joe story, just we own it. Basically, if you make money off of it, I might be getting these rules really, really wrong, but if you make money off of it, it's fine, but we own the IP, like whatever you're using is ours. And they had 4 final submissions. They voted on the final submission, and that figure got to be made into a character, and that character was Stiletto. The only thing I know about Stiletto, since I've not read the story, is that she works with or for Mercer. But it's an awesome figure. This, again, was coming out at a time where female Joes were few and far between, and new characters that were female even less likely. I mean, maybe as far back as Bomb Strike. So yeah, there's quite a few figures from this era that I think get overlooked a lot. Tombstone was a new original character designed to be a foil for Duke as sort of like the Cobra field leader, and because he came so late in the line and was part of a 2-pack that wasn't as desirable, I feel like he just got brushed over. But I think that's an excellent character to add into the Cobra run.
I believe Stiletto in the story was supposed to be Cobra, but they shifted her to Joe for whatever reason. Could be wrong, but I feel like that was the conversation I remember from the time. And Tombstone is a great figure with just... like the head is slightly too big. So when you look at the figure, if you really look, and I'm sorry if you've never noticed this and if it bums you out from moving forward, but...
Oh, no.
The head is just a little too big. And I think it's a true crime that they didn't give us a better file card. Because the file cards on these 50th figures were really bad.
Yes. Severely lacking any information at all.
And generally, they were just directly tied to whatever character or characters they were, because all the 50th was either 2-packs or 3-packs or vehicle sets, but every single file card played into whatever character they were paired with. just a really, really bummer of a situation, and just really almost like ignorable completely. And I feel like Tombstone kind of suffers from, it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand you can create your own canon, but I feel like he suffers a little bit just from not having any information. My honorable mention is Shooter. I feel like it's a figure that a lot of old heads were excited about. I know there's a lot of controversy whether Shooter's male, female, whatever. I mean, Larry made her who she is and wrote an incredible one-off story surrounding this version of Shooter. And I'm pretty sure it's the only actual version of Shooter. But,
yes, I don't think it's controversial at all. If you don't think this is the Shooter that exists from G.I. Joe #1, you come at me, because I'm ready to fight you. We did a great breakdown of G.I. Joe Declassified. If you're unfamiliar with Shooter, you can watch those episodes and learn a lot more about her.
When I actually randomly found that trade,
Declassified?
Yeah.
Declassified, yeah.
I found that at some like weird like mall comic store, and I remember like I shout out to Jason, but I texted him a photo and I was like, what is this? I was like, it says Hama, but it's IDW, or I mean, it's Image or Devil's Due. And he was like, you should get that. And I was like, okay. So I grabbed it, and then I think I read it on the way home. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the exact Shooter figure I have. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah. Huge fan of this figure. Again, we're talking this was the very end of the modern line. I mean, again, I get it. The modern line lives and dies, much like a zombie viper. But I would have never in a million years expected to see this figure come out. And the fact that it did looks good. Beautiful head mold. I mean, I was just so happy when they fill a void like this, a character that is long forgotten. There's no better feeling in my collecting.
I agree. You could say the same thing I said about Quinn with this figure. I think it's a home run. It's a salute to the fans. It's a thank you to the fans. And it I never understood the guff about this figure, because in all honesty, there was quite a few stinkers in the 50th, and this was an absolute home run.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shame that it came so late, because, as we saw with that Retro Scarlet, the potential for reuse on an almost blank canvas is unheard of. So I think they could have done a lot more with her.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a shame, because there's a lot of new, I think almost all new tooling for her. And they brought in some really good secondaries, and they've this is a thing that I've talked about on my show, and I think you and I are very similar on this. But I don't need my female characters to look over-sexualized. It's not I think what the club did with the Cobra Troopers was a real bummer and a real letdown, because they were like incredibly dainty in all the areas except for their chest, and I just remember getting them and just being like why are female Cobra Troopers in high heels? Like, Baroness is kind of the only exception to that rule, but I also wish that we got like a more combat ready Baroness, because she wasn't afraid to fight. Like, I understand, she's a complicated character and the heels work with her, but she's also not afraid to fight. But whatever. But
it would be nice to have like a boots on the ground version where she's like, I don't know, one single piece of armor anywhere. Yeah, I get it.
I built my own Ultimate Baroness out of some Marauder parts using the SDCC Baroness head. And it's nice because it's a female body with armor and like combat pants and combat boots.
We'll talk more about the club and the figure subscription service on our third and almost certainly final part of this series, where we've still got to do the FSS and the club. I've got a lot to say about that, not just in terms of quality, but because it's such a long running series. We're picking 4 of each. 4 Joes and 4 Cobras for the FSS and the con. We'll talk about them at great length. We're going to need a little room for this anyway, because I'm going to spread out and start talking. I'm really into the FSS and club figures, and
they're also incredibly complicated because they were all significantly more expensive.
Yeah. You do have to justify what the price that you're paying for sometimes what you are acknowledging is pretty low quality.
But yeah, I'm hoping we can get back for part 3 a little bit sooner than the time gap in this one. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know, it gives people something to look forward to. Joel, where can our listeners find you if they want to hear more about your opinions on modern figures and other things?
So I am 50% of the Order of Battle. So if you search Order of Battle and wherever you find your podcast, you can find us there. I run the Order of Battle Instagram. And, and I said this last time and I'll say it again. Truly, by all means, if you want to chop it up and talk about modern figures, if you want to tell me you think I'm an idiot with my choices, that's fine. I'd love to talk about it because as you've heard from, these last 2 episodes, Greg and I evaluate modern figures drastically different.
Completely differently, yes.
But,
Jaron and I are the same way. It's what I like. You don't want to listen to a show where 2 people nod their heads in agreement all the time. I like having somebody. You and Jaron both have unique information about the builds and the details that comes with figures that I am just like a kid in a candy store. I just glossing over it and going straight for like, what's his face look like? Is this a character that I have? Those are my priorities.
But I mean, I also like that even when we land on picking the same figure, we have our own conversation piece to it. It's not just like, yep, this is Quinn. We love Quinn.
We love Quinn. Big fan of people with shorts. You can reach out to us on social media at Anything Joe's Pod. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Nope, I got that wrong. No, I got that right. You can find our YouTube channel on just flat out Anything Joe's. And if you'd like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got different opinions on these modern figures, if there's figures that we left out that you think we should be included, you better believe we want to hear about it because I was just about as engrossed in the modern collection as I've ever been. I still find myself coming back to it every single day. And it's my number one passion in the line. And it has been for quite a while. So I enjoy digging into the trenches and finding the unforgotten gems and the characters that people overlooked. We'll be back in 2 short weeks. Well, Jaron and I will be. And where you can listen to all of our zany adventures and mishaps. Where the plot of the show is so unpredictable that even I don't know what we're going to talk about here on Anything Joe's.